Thank you all ever so much for joining us for this panel on publisher first-party data. And I'd just like to thank the previous panel for teeing us up. And yeah, this discussion will kind of go a little bit more into the weeds on that data. But yeah, it's really nice scene setting there. Before we kick off, I'd just like to flag that there is a poll question for this panel. So if you'd like to go into your app at any point during the session and vote on that, and we'll make some time to discuss that at the end. So yeah, before we kick off properly, I'd like to ask you all to introduce yourselves, starting with you, Sarah.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Robertson and I head up product for Experian Marketing Services. So we're supporting with many publishers to really get to grips and understand their traffic, especially unauthenticated traffic onto their site.
Hi everyone, I'm Josef Najm. I work for Reuters. I've been with the company for 5 years. My role is unique in the way that I oversee everything that's related to biddable media, both on-platform as well as off-platform across social media partnerships. And really, I'm working with our editorial team to ensure we're driving revenue opportunities across the board with them, but stitching through data solutions across the board as much as possible.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria Trevillion. I head up the ad operations team and data at Gumtree and Motors.co.uk, but my background is more programmatic and ad tech.
And hello everyone, my name is Nathan. I look after Addressable activation at KINESSO, responsible for best-in-class activation and enhancing our product proposition.
Brilliant, that's the kind of full-on energy we need. But yeah, to kick off into the discussion, we've obviously discussed the importance of first-party data for years now, and obviously some of the discussions we've had earlier on in the day have really emphasised that, and obviously we'll go into later on in the discussion about obviously Google and their flip-flopping on cookie deprecation, which obviously feeds into that, the importance of that data discussion. But my first question to you guys is, have publishers really changed their business models to adopt that data-first approach? And if so, what does this look like from a practical point of view? Joseph, let's start with you.
Love it, thank you. So it's important to understand that in this industry we need to be data-driven, and that's the language that a lot of buyers use as well. I'm sure Nathan will speak to it. As a publisher, being data-driven really for us is bucketed into like 3 pillars. You have your insights, you have activation, and then you have attribution and measurement. And those 3 pillars follow you across the different business units, whether it be revenue, product, editorial. You need insights to build a product or write a story, or how are you going to speak to your consumer? Then you need to activate. So is it using tangible audiences to target, or activate by actually building a product? Did it work in terms of attribution? So these things are constantly being discussed and reviewed, but it's only as good as the data that you have. So kind of underlining this pillar is the foundation, and that's the pool of data that you're capturing. So over the last few years, Reuters has been capturing first-party data through a registration wall. With that registration wall, we're capturing deterministic data that is then complemented and supplemented by our non-deterministic data that's all related to our premium trusted news content. So we really have a winning combo that then is leveraged both for our clients as well as our internal teams. So it's really important to identify those, and I put it into those 3 buckets because I think it simplifies. I'm an ad tech and martech specialist. My editors aren't, or product people aren't. So when you simplify it and you're able to have a discussion that makes it very simple to actually leverage those data or that pool of data, it can go a lot farther.
And Victoria, how does leveraging that data work from a Gumtree point of view?
Yeah, so I think I agree with everything you've said. I think just to go back to the point around data first, I wouldn't necessarily say we're a data first business or that many publishers are data first, but it's about having data at parity with the rest of your media. So for Gumtree, it's around data or audiences supporting the value of our media, and in some cases enhancing the value of our media. And it was referenced earlier by the buy side, interestingly, on a couple of panels, but where we've seen the most success in that is where there is synergy between creative formats and targeting, or like data. So where we've really been successful in doubling down on our data proposition is making sure that it's fed through every stage of the sales cycle. So from providing insights pre-campaign, whether that's around audience trends that we're seeing on sites, to the kind of behaviours that we're seeing with our audience and then recommending formats to complement those behaviours, to then looking at audience insights post-campaign to inform future activity. That's where we've really kind of upped the game in terms of the data we're using, rather than making a step change in the kind of data that we're collecting.
Interesting. And Nathan, what's the buy-side role in helping facilitate that?
Yeah, I was going to say, so from the buy-side point of view, we've definitely seen that shift and change over the last 15 years or so. If we go back 15 plus years ago, as a buyer, we used to be really excited, even on the publisher side. There's this opportunity, this thing that we call a PMP. Everybody will get excited, we'll finally get the sign-off, and it'll take about a week just to troubleshoot because we've seen 1p in the spend. Fast forward to today, it's common, it's general knowledge, it's common practice. They don't even need to speak to you, I can just get it up and running and utilize the publisher's first-party data, which in today's world is something that is sort of gold from a buyer's point of view, because that is something that can help enrich our activation, especially in a world where even though Google's no longer dropping a third-party cookie, according to Statista, they only represent around 50% of the UK market share in a way. So advertisers and buyers should continue to invest in privacy methods and approaches, and utilizing a publisher's first-party data is just one way in how we can do so to enrich our activation.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point in terms of that cookie deprecation piece, because obviously now that the choice is passed to the users, it can be even less than what it is currently. And obviously we've seen the likes of GDPR compliant cookie notices. People aren't necessarily willing to accept on those. So yeah, that slice of the pie could get even smaller.
And I've heard people say, oh, Google's not dropping a third-party cookie, I can still tap into my third-party audiences. The reality is the decision is being passed on to the consumer, and if you can't access that data via first-party cookie, that scale is simply going to reduce. So hence by utilizing first-party data as one option that as buyers we can use to help surpass our client KPIs.
And Sarah, what tactics with that in mind are available to publishers to gather and manage and activate upon their data?
So it's really interesting to hear from you, Joseph, and hear about actually the data wall and how some publishers you log into and it's all behind that wall. But many publishers have actually got an open site, and there's different tactics because actually they might not necessarily know that individuals, so that you've got to think about what data are they collecting and how can they augment that data with other rich sources of data as well, which is why sort of curated marketplaces and that interjection of audience and content is becoming more and more to the front. I mean, we heard it a lot this morning through all of the curated audiences are really coming through. So I think that will be really important to see that sort of how do you identify people, how do you use interoperability in terms of identification, because without the third-party cookie, there's many different solutions, and how do you include audience data in with that publisher's own data?
Interesting. And Joseph and Vicky, do you have any recommendations for publishers without that access to that first-party data and how they can scale their operations and offering to buyers?
Well, I think every publisher has first-party data. Even if it's someone coming to your site, that contextual segment is first-party, and that's powerful. Especially, I don't want to jump into AI, but prompt solutions that will be developed, that's all context-related. But what's important is understanding that audience targeting isn't the only thing that's being threatened by a deprecated cookie. Again, I go back to insights, activation, attribution. Your ability to measure something might also be impacted. Your ability to have the insights from the campaign previously, those are things that are going to be impacted. So I think publishers really need to review or continue to do what they do, which is understand their consumer, who's coming to their site. So Nathan was referencing privacy first. We think about that, we think about accessibility, we think about the experience of someone reading our content. What experiences are we going to need to integrate into that content outside of just consent approval, but through the article experience, the web experience, what future prompt experiences might be, where consumers are willing to give consent in different ways, whether it be more information through surveys. So asking a question if you don't have a registration wall, related to anything that might be, I think of the topic where we know we have C-suite individuals who come to our site. If you have a survey on your site that is a third party that helps you understand who is that C-suite? Are they a mom? Are they buying back to school work, or back to school clothes for their children? That's a whole new audience that we could go after to sell to that we didn't have previously when someone signed up for registration, because they don't give that. So it's finding those unique ways to stitch that into that consumer experience that you develop, but staying core and true to who you are as a publisher and protecting that consumer experience as well. So we need to be creative in those ways. And identity first, because that stitches through all those three pillars, and then getting into a little bit more of developing the understanding of who that audience is. Interesting. And Victoria, what tactics have you used and can you recommend to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about starting with where you are most authentic. So for Gumtree, obviously we're a marketplace. People are often visiting the site because they're searching for something, they're looking for something. It could be something to buy or a service or something. So we really started with building a strong taxonomy around those different behaviours or different types of intent that we saw in the verticals. But we then moved on to looking at patterns of behaviour that we saw through research that our marketing team had done around the fact that people often visit Gumtree when they're experiencing a key life change. So it could be moving house, getting a new job, having a baby. And we'd see things like people searching for baby items, but also searching for a larger vehicle, for instance. Or people moving home could be searching for a man with a van as well as buying and selling furniture. And so we started to build out those kind of different personas, if you like, to build on our original intent. But one area we were a bit challenged with was the perception that Gumtree was really performance focused because of that intent that we'd often see on our site. And there we really leaned on third-party vendors to help us build a branding proposition. So, for instance, we work with Programmatic now, and we provide a brand study on most of the campaigns we run. And it even surprised us to see some of the brand study results that are coming through, like we index more highly than the brand metrics average for impact on brand. And we also looked at things like, for example, what formats we were running in mobile web. Because it's all very well to have amazing audiences and the most qualified audiences, but actually if it doesn't fit in terms of which formats the client wants to run, you're losing so much of your audience on the 70% of users who are on mobile web. So we looked at putting more branding formats into mobile web, and that really helped us kind of support our branding proposition. So yeah, for us, it was just about kind of starting where we were authentic and then looking at where we could go from there. But I think it would be fair to say we would never try and build a travel audience, for instance, or like ask users about their salaries, because it just wouldn't feel like the kind of information that a user would share with us.
Interesting. It's catering to the audiences that you have.
Yeah.
Nathan, from the buy side, how have you supported publishers trying out these tactics, trying out these new different ways of activating upon the data that they own and have access to?
Yeah, I guess as referenced earlier, is when there's that rich quality first-party data, that's something that as an agency we want to tap into. As an agency, we love to support publishers that's providing quality media, where we can support quality journalism. Something that sometimes get missed off is diverse and inclusive content, where sometimes they may not have not all, but some may not have the resources or capabilities to be able to serve ads in a programmatic way. Again, we'll help in sort of accommodating them and pointing them in the right direction to the right partners to help facilitate that. And then when we are buying from, publishers such as yourselves, it's always tapping that to the right audience. So one data set can have a completely different performance from one client to another. I guess as an agency, our client is our primary responsibility in surpassing their KPIs, but we try to maximize our return and work with the publishers to get that sweet spot. Just because we've got that great audience, first publisher data, if the price skyrockets by 100 times than what it was before, it's probably not going to be a match for our advertiser. And as a result, both parties will miss out. We miss out on getting that data, the publisher will miss out on that lost revenue. But if we can work with that sweet equilibrium with the economics of supply and demand, I think all parties will be better off, and we can help, continue the sort of free ad ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that free ad ecosystem, it's such an important thing in terms of obviously the panel previously discussed in terms of how it funds a free and open web and in terms of trusted news journalism, which is what we rely on for factual information. But also underpinning that is this element of trust. And now that cookie consent has been placed into the hands of consumers across the open web, how can publishers offer brands and buyers access to the audience in a way that respects that trust and respects that consent? Sarah?
So just to clarify, cookie consent has been in consumers' hands since 2018
Sure.
As part of GDPR and PEG regulations. So all publishers probably know that, and it's a bit unsure about how what the Google announcement will actually do to that consent journey, because it has been in their hands. Obviously, we've had things like the changes in iOS and in-app tracking, etc., and that's had an impact. But we're already at a place where quite a lot of the open web is without cookie. Cookie isn't necessarily a reliable way to do the things like add the insight, add the measurement and look after the audience. So we are in a state of flux, but actually we can't rely on cookies right now either. So we've really got to lean into this change that we've got. And many people already started that. They've started it for several years with the announcement from Google. We did. People have spent millions, billions probably, trying to solve for that issue. So let's see what happens. We still need to respect people's privacy and transparency, and consumers should always come first. We should always have a really strong value exchange with consumers. They should want to give us their data, and they should see value in doing that. We should have better content. They should be served more relevant advertising, and they should get rewards if those are appropriate. But that value exchange is really, really important. And your brand is really important within that as well. How trustworthy are you? How expected is that piece of information? You said about the travel audiences. Like, actually, do they expect to give you a piece of information? On whether they're a stay-at-home mum, if they're a CEO as well. So it's like, actually, we need to keep consumers in mind throughout all of this, because they're the people that are actually the brands want to get after, and the agencies want to do the brands. They're in control, and we need to make sure that they feel that they're in control of that value exchange with us.
And Joseph, how have you worked to build those relationships and maintain that trust?
Well, Reuters is a 170-year-old company. We began by our founder, Paul Julius Reuter, a German engineer who cared about efficiency. So efficient that he got facts and information to people with pigeons that flew the streets of London and France across the canal. We're less pigeons today, and now many of different ways through our 2,600 global journalists who are providing the facts and information, not only from a consumer perspective to businesses as well, like the CNNs and the major publications of the world. So trust is at our core. We follow our trust principles. This is what our consumers expect, the way we approach content, the simplicity of how we do articles as well. It's very much to the point, to the facts, what took place. I do want to go back to your point you said around, consent for the consumers has been around since 2018, you said, with GDPR. That is interesting to me as a publisher who's thinking about, okay, now the hands are in the control of Google, where the marketplace has made consumers more educated in our industry, which for a long time, the question was, how do you describe programmatic or what you do to your family member? I think people kind of know now, right? People are aware of targeted advertising. So if Google's in control or Chrome is in control of putting that consent out there and just we don't know what it's going to look like. Big red button, don't give consent over what our prompt experiences are, where we better know our consumer. That keeps me up a little bit at night. That's a risk to my ability to capture that identity. Now, you're right, though. iOS, 50%, mobile experience, we already don't see that. But I think it's important through this kind of change that we're going to traverse, as you said, as we say as publishers, continue to stay close to your consumer, stay core to your attributes of who you are, and when you create your experiences on the site, leverage the insights you have to make sure that that product that's being output is the right product for them.
Interesting. And Victoria, how do you at Gumtree, build and maintain that trust with the consumer, obviously in presumably different ways, given you're an entirely different type of publisher?
Yeah, so I think on the consent piece, just broadly speaking, I think publishers have been really just recipients we've done really the bare minimum to be compliant. It's probably not true in all cases, but compliance was like the thing that we all rushed for in 2018. And then really, if you look at what, the cookie banner now, there hasn't been really a step change since then. It's just on the site. And I think as a user, it doesn't make sense, right? You accept or reject, but a lot of the time people actually aren't making a conscious choice to just get the banner off because I want to use the site. And that is probably partly in publishers' hands to message their users better around that. But I think we could work better with tech vendors to do some of like the back end stuff around that, those users who really want to dig into what data has been collected and shared with which ad tech partners should be able to do that. But at the same time, there could be a simpler message for users, which is around, personalized advertising is helping keep the site free in a lot of cases. And you've got a choice here, like you can reject consent, you're absolutely within your rights to do so, but I think publishers could present better choice architecture around that. So as well as things like pay or consent, which is really interesting to see those developments in the last few weeks. Obviously that's not going to work for all publishers. Like I don't think that would really work for Gumtree. And some publishers, especially small sites, might struggle to actually integrate that as well or accept payments and things like that. But we could look at doing things like, saying personalised ads keep Gumtree for free. Will you join 94% of Gumtree users who accept personalised ads on this site? And present kind of more positive choices around that to try and maximise consent. But yeah, I just think as a user, it's not a great experience right now.
We do something today with ad block consumers or consumers who leverage that. We say, do you support trusted journalism? Please undo your ad blocker. And the retention rate to give consent is very high. So there are definitely solutions around that.
I guess just to add to what everyone is saying, is the consumer is very powerful. As we can see, it's a consumer that can make a business go up, and it's the consumer that can make the business go down. And I think as an industry, I think everybody and every part of the advertising ecosystem has a part to play in terms of if the end consumer is getting poured or distributed poor quality ads or poor messaging or just being bombarded with ads every 2 seconds. It's these things that leads to a consumer to put on an ad blocker, and as a result, the publisher is getting less money, whereas, we heard earlier, they're putting, blood, sweat and tears to get this quality journalism out there, but because of the poor advertising or poor messaging that's being done, it's disruptive to the consumer journey. So I think everybody has a part to play, and when the consumer sees that, there'll be less of a reason for them to put in certain practices such as the ad blockers in place, because they want to be targeted ads that are relevant for them, where they can actually make purchase decisions that benefits their lifestyle.
Interesting. And in terms of those, data signals beyond, the basic cookie, what do those signals tell buyers about publisher audiences?
So there's many different signals that an advertiser or as an agency can utilize. And again, what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another. We have what we call a test and learn approach or experimentation. It could be a small tweak or something that's small that works for one and vice versa. And I think as an agency or as advertisers, it's important that they leverage all those different signals and see what works best for their clients and maximize that to help surpass their client outcomes and KPIs.
Absolutely. We've talked earlier in the day about AI. In terms of tools that have been proposed to publishers, AI has been flagged as a potential suite of solutions. My next question to you guys is, what technology tools and solutions are publishers using to improve their data gathering and activation? And does AI have a role to play here, or should publishers be a little more wary of those technologies? Josef.
Yeah. Good to get an AI question after bringing up AI before, so I'm ready for it. Related to AI, right? It's important to separate AI and Gen AI. Like, we've been working in the AI space since working in ad tech. Like, that is what we do. Machine learning is AI. I think where AI has failed us is the way in which, as before Rob is describing, brand safety solutions where keyword lists and pre-bid segments and these various things have identified quality journalism as not brand safe. That is an area where AI has failed us. And the companies or the verification companies which control these machine learning algorithms and these AI solutions to force both buyers and publishers to use them need to review that, right? And identify whether or not those tranched years of data is accurate or not. Now, putting the publishers into back more control, who are the vendors out there that recognize that problem too and are willing to come into your site and review your entire taxonomy to establish your own AI taxonomy to output back to buyers like Nathan so that it is the appropriate signal that's being sent. So I think solutions like that is very important. That's something that as a news publisher, we think about and how we're going to develop our taxonomy and leverage AI from that standpoint. Going into Gen AI and what that looks like, that is completely different experience, right? That is a prompt experience. That consumer, which is a small subset of consumers, whether you want to call them prompt consumers, for example. You might have heard prompt engineers that people are hiring for. That's completely different than our day-to-day consumer that we're dealing with today. They're used to the experience of our site. Prompt experiences can be entire new applications and new frontiers for us. But at the core of it, it's contextual. It's a solution that a future buyer might even be willing to pay, and we're seeing this with Perplexity, not just a standard ad that we know today, a video or banner, but context before a trusted source. So if you prompt a question, who's to say a global leading bank doesn't want their thought leaders to jump ahead in that context or in that prompt and pay for that versus a Reuters or a Wall Street Journal or a CNN who wants to give commentary on that. So those are two different things on the AI front.
Yeah, it's important to make that classification and distinction. Victoria, I want to find out from you what tech tools and solutions you're using. I know you flagged that obviously the vendor side could do a little bit more to support there, and do you share those hesitancies around the use of AI?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're quite a small team, a small advertising team. So for us, tools and technologies mostly are focused on areas that we don't have in-house expertise. And it makes sense in a lot of cases to rely on a third party to, I don't know, build a CMP or for a lot of the technologies that it doesn't make sense for publishers to build on their own. I think there's a risk of, in some cases, AI not working very well for the publisher, but the publisher not getting much oversight, or tools and technologies more generally than AI, the publisher not getting oversight of that. So, for instance, we've seen one tool that we looked at was indexing content on our site and had about 3% of our inventory classified as motors. We represent motors.co.uk, and a large proportion of Gumtree is also motors content. So some of our top audiences are autos content. So, if a buyer was relying just on some AI tools and not having a conversation with us, they could be missing out on a huge amount of our inventory. So I think there's definitely a role to play there. But it's also, I think, about staying close to the buy side so that we can really kind of maximise results for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, from your perspective, is there more to be done to support those publishers who aren't able to use either some of the tools available or develop their own tools to create and manage these sophisticated data sets?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Victoria said, there's a vast array of publishers, and not all publishers can really invest in developing their own tech stack. So vendors like Experian have to go in and help and try and give data and solutions. And we work across many partners as well, because we don't do everything. It's a broad ecosystem and complex ecosystem. So it's allowing vendors to really support in any way they can across the ecosystem.
Interesting. And Nathan, from your side of things on the buy side, how can you work with both the tech vendors and publishers to help them create these sophisticated data sets?
Yeah, I mean, from the buyer side, we definitely get involved in helping to support these initiatives and being the first to test even some of these initiatives as well, especially when it comes to AI. As Joseph said, it's nothing new. It's been here from the inception of programmatic in terms of machine learning, etc. The iteration, of course, has advanced. I remember, when I first started the industry, I took great pride in creating 30 different line items for a 10K campaign. Now we have AI that does that for us, so we can reduce that and be more efficient. And working with tech partners, allows us to increase the outputs, getting the benefits from synergy for our clients.
Yeah, I'm glad that's become slightly more efficient for you. We are rapidly drawing out of time, but I'd just like to go back and see what the results of our poll were, if that's possible. So it's encouraging to see that, nearly 2/3 are saying, yes, it's going to be the dawning of a new age for publishers for the win. Guys, any quick fire reactions to that poll result?
I'd like to say it's a partnership with the buy side as well. I go back to that pillar of attribution. I think 15, 20 years ago, we developed a pixel as a publisher and asked the buy side to put that on their site. They'd freak out. Ad tech today does it all the time. Cool, no problem. So if we really want to prove business outcomes for the buy side, we need to figure out how to drive and show ROI. And I think there's going to be more opportunity for partnership and development or data collaboration that needs to take place over the next few years together. It can't just be publishers for the win. Like it's collaborative. Yes, ad tech will support us, but it's okay to open the doors and have conversations about this.
Yeah, and that's a lovely, harmonious note to end things on. But guys, I'd love to thank you ever so much for joining us. Please have a round of applause.